Welcome to Three Questions, where critical thinking is king, and my opinions and research are only here to support your learning and deeper understanding. Hey, I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so honored you clicked on Three Questions today to talk about neuroplasticity. Now, if you've heard of that term before, you might already understand what it is, or maybe it's kind of brand new to you. But let's just kind of get on the same, playing field here. So in the past, there were thoughts that after a certain age, our brain wasn't able to adapt or change. Like there's a saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that has been disproven, and we have found that you can make changes in your brain throughout a lifetime. Now, I always like to be really clear. Our brains are a little more adaptable and plastic when we're kids, and it is a little bit harder to do as you're an adult. But for me, it's, stop saying things are impossible just because maybe we don't want to do it. So let's dig into this idea of neuroplasticity, what it means, should we really care, how focused should we be, and, how can we fit it into what we already do? So let's get right into question one. What are your expectations of neuroplasticity? And maybe a better question would be, are you in a place where you're focused enough to see it through? I'll let you sit on that for a sec. So something I say to clients all the time, and I feel like I'm starting to sound like a broken record. So I don't know, I think I'm going to change it because although they hear me, I don't think it's resonating in the way I want it to. I say this a lot. Listen, I know you want to fix your low back pain, bad foot, spasticity, walking patterns, but learning a new movement pattern's like learning a new language. And would you expect me to teach you French in an hour session? And they're like, no, absolutely not. So it's easy to understand that learning a new movement pattern is in fact very similar to learning a language. It's difficult. It takes focus. You've got to practice it. You've got to make mistakes. But here's where I think the difference comes in. I don't want to say all of us, but many of us have been moving our entire life. Now, if you're like a natural athlete or a superstar, that comes really easy to you. You're naturally born with great body awareness, which is a combination of excellent proprioception and sensory integration with your visual, vestibular, and other senses that your brain is taking in. And then you might be someone like me who was coordinated enough, but movement did not come easy to me. My brain was always protecting me. I mean, I feel like if you ask some of my coaches, I would complain oi, my back hurts when we would do stretches. And they're like, hey, you're 6, you don't have a low back injury. But when we were stretching our hips, I wasn't really able to differentiate my hip from my lower back. And it would make my back hurt. I didn't have the words or the understanding that I do now. But at that time, because it didn't feel good, I just didn't do it. Okay? So when we think about neuroplasticity from a movement perspective, what are your expectations? Are you expecting to go to a workout class once and nail a routine or, exercises? Are you saying, okay, I'm going to do it 3 times a week for 6 months to achieve this goal and then stop? I'm not judging any of your expectations, but we've got to be clearer. What do you want to get out of neuroplasticity? Do you actually want to take the time to learn that new movement pattern and make it efficient? Making it more efficient than maybe old movement patterns that either didn't serve you or weren't getting you to your goals. I mean, I'd like to speak multiple languages. I often joke, but it is not a joke. I can barely speak English. I mean, I'm serious, but I have trouble with pronunciations. I even have trouble saying that. But it's just not how my brain works. So I always ask people, am I saying your name right? Can you say that word for me so I can hear it, so I can replicate that sound? Now that might surprise you because I excelled in school. Doesn't mean I'm smarter than you. It just means I excelled in school because it was fit to my learning style. But through all that, I still have trouble with reading and comprehension. Meaning, sometimes when I read, because I'm actually a speed reader and my eyes kind of take in the full picture, not word by word, I can sometimes get lost. And something that annoys my business partner, although she's very patient with me, I am a terrible editor because I see the full picture and not individual parts as well. I miss errors all the time. So we now joke that I put errors in our email sequences to make sure she's paying attention. That's not the reason why. Maybe you're thinking, oh my God, my brain's like that. Or you're like, I don't know, that doesn't resonate with me at all. Well, we don't have the same brain. Lucky for you. Trust me. So going back to question 1, what are your actual expectations? I think all of us have goals in mind. Some of them might be less popular. Like I feel like you're not allowed to have weight loss goals anymore. I mean, if you want to lose weight, that is your business. None of my business. If you want to get stronger, that is also great. If you want to be more flexible, if you just want to live without pain, these are all great goals. So don't let social media or anybody tell you your goal should be something different. All right, that's number 1. So when we think about our goals, I want everybody right now to think of a movement goal they have. It could be like big, it could be small. Put it in your brain right now. And I want you to think, if you want to use neuroplasticity to get there, well, here's some of the technical things that need to happen. Now, I'm not going to go through all the mechanisms of neuroplasticity and the brain chemicals, frankly, because I don't know them all. And it changes so much. There's been even new research coming out about dopamine that, yes, and it does this, but something else. A part of the brain I'm obsessed with is the cerebellum, and I get so annoyed when I see people doing these cerebellar assessments and saying that's targeting the cerebellum. It's actually, those assessments are actually testing something completely different. A role that the cerebellum takes, but the cerebellum also does other things. Why does this annoy me? Well, because I research it and have some knowledge other people don't. Is that their fault? No. Because sometimes when we hear something for the first time, we think it's new research. But really be careful. It's something, I mean, maybe it's because I'm writing a dissertation and doing my doctorate right now, or I don't actually think that's it, guys, if I'm being honest. I just never want to say something that I don't know for a fact is true. Not because I care about backlash, but I would feel really bad. I have like a guilty conscience. I was like a terrible liar as a kid. But I wouldn't want to steer you in the wrong direction and think you're like really getting something, and to find out 10 years later, I was completely wrong. All right? So a lot of times in my courses, I'm like, this is supported by research. This is what I'm thinking. This is where we need more research. So it's limited. All right? So that gives you kind of a little of the backstory with how much brain science is changing. So if I could be so bold to say, take everything, what I'm about to say, with a grain of salt. This is what we know as of today. What's today's date? Oh, it's August 1st, 2025. And be excited, be curious. If you find any new research, you better hit me up and tell me, all right? Don't be an ass on social media and be like, bitch, you were wrong. No, educate me, tell me. I want to know. So, in order for neuroplasticity to occur, we need epinephrine to release. Okay, now that sounds easy enough. Why epinephrine? Well, it increases arousal, alertness, and it signals the brain to pay attention. Get ready, something important is about to occur. That's how I see epinephrine. Now, what's interesting is in research supports that you need failure or a significant challenge to actually trigger epinephrine. How many of us like to fail? I don't like to do anything I'm bad at. I'll be honest, okay? I said it. I work with a good friend of mine, Justin. Shout out, I believe his business is Live More Human. I always screw it up. I'm going to have Joe put his Instagram in the show notes. He doesn't do a lot of Instagram, but he's great with weight training and kettlebells. And I work out with him because I'm like, yo, Justin, I need you to fill the sensory gaps that I'm not filling. So we kind of, our sessions are always working together. And him and I always walk away and we're like, oh, that was awesome. So I encourage you to find a Justin. Okay? Now, number 2, Justin is the kind of dude who will like tinker with something until he figures it out. Like he can't figure out that movement for jiu-jitsu or soccer or whatever the hell he's doing. So he just keeps at it. Oh, please. I am not that person. I'm like, bitch, give me all the information, tell me all the rules, show me what it should look like, and then I'm going to try it. And if I don't think it's possible in my body, I'm going to do something else. Not because I'm a jerk, but because it feels so bad to my body when I can't do it. And I don't mean from a mental standpoint, because how my brain reacts is with tension and tightness in the joints. If you're hypermobile, or EDS or connective tissue, your body probably responds completely different. But just remember, all our bodies respond differently. So I'll say to Justin, it's a flow day, not a go day. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to answer question 1 for you. It ain't always about neuroplasticity. Some days aren't a go day. Some days I am not in the place to really focus on creating a new movement pattern. I am hanging on by a thread. Let's do movements I can do comfortably and reinforce those patterns. Those are flow days and not go days. Now, flow days always end up in a go day later. Because if we were trying to create a new movement pattern and make it efficient every day, ew, what would we be doing to our brain? We're never going to kind of get to a deeper understanding or realization of a certain thing. And I don't want to be an expert at one thing. And I like to be curious. Obviously, hello, this is my podcast about. But I do like to tinker with things for a little bit. So, are you in a go state or a flow state? When you're in a go state, I want you to try something that you fail at. It's got to be a challenge. But research also shows if it is too much of a challenge or you don't see the value, like Megan just said, it is not going to trigger epinephrine. How do we get into that sweet spot, that zone? Ugh, I believe it's called balance. Ew, I feel like balance is like a concept that is like an earworm to me. You know, it's what I do for work, but like, isn't the true goal in life to have some kind of balance between things? Anyway, that's a different podcast episode. I believe it's the episode right before this where I talk about balance. So think about every movie montage you see when it's sports related, or even, what do you call those? Romantic comedies. There's a challenge. The person fails. So Rocky, he loses a fight. But then something happens where he finds that motivation again to beat the Russian. And he goes and he boxes against meat in a frozen locker. This is, I believe, Rocky IV. And then he ends the Cold War. And if you don't know what I mean, go watch Rocky IV. But that's what the montage is. It's overcoming that frustration. But let me tell you, Rocky thought he could beat that Russian. If he didn't, none of that would have carried through. He would have never had that kind of motivation and neuroplasticity to get stronger or reinforce his patterns. I don't really know what Rocky needed. He doesn't answer my calls to reach his goals. Okay? So think, if you are in a place to focus on neuroplasticity, if your expectations are, I need a new movement pattern, I'm in pain, I'm struggling. There's 2 ways out of this. Either I get focused on making a change, or I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life. That's a tough spot. And if you're in that spot, I want to send you out positive energy. Reach out. If there's anything I can do to help, please trust I will. But anything's possible. And if you're at that bottom where you don't think it's possible, me saying that might piss you off. I can't control how you receive my words. I can only control my intention of reminding you about neuroplasticity and things that are possible. Keeping in mind that pain is a huge disruptor to neuroplasticity and focus. So if you're living with pain right now, in order to get that epinephrine release, you need something to really, sensory input that really releases epinephrine big. And I might even hypothesize, and I got to look at the research for this. With chronic pain, I want to look at the research. Somebody look into this. Let me know. What does the research show when you have chronic pain, I mean for over a year, if you need more sensory input or a more distinct shift to create that release in epinephrine? Let's be curious together, right? Now, bad news, good news, I don't know. It's not all about epinephrine. That's only step one, guys. Step two is we need acetylcholine to be released from 2 locations. Okay? Yeesh. Now, this should all happen. The epinephrine, if we're kind of in the right environment, the right rules of neuroplasticity, this is not so complicated. But think of this. The epinephrine is kind of like, get ready, things are about to happen. And the acetylcholine is going to spotlight that neurological change or shift in your brain. Something that people don't really know is the neuroplasticity, the change isn't happening in the gym, in the Pilates studio, during the initial bout of learning. That's where the epinephrine and acetylcholine spotlights it. And then when we're sleeping and resting, this is why sleep is so important, guys. And if you're still having trouble with sleep, please listen to my episode on sleep and go find resources for sleep hygiene. It's critical. I mean, dare I say, you need to figure out your sleep immediately. However, there could be a lot of disruptors to your sleep that you need to address first. But to me, guys, if you're not getting good sleep and you want to work neuroplasticity, you need change, that should be goal number one. I know you might not hear it like that because you're like, no, I want the change. I get it. But the change is not going to really occur unless we have the opportunity for it to happen. Okay? So I went a little technical there, but think about this. And the also bad news is measuring epinephrine and acetylcholine in a learning bout is pretty complex and needs to be done at a high-level lab. This is not what I'm doing in my studio. We are trying to identify other factors that increase focus and attention, which I'll address in question 2, because we are not able to study the release of acetylcholine and epinephrine. So how do we know what we're doing in our clinic and studio is actually working? Okay, once we've identified those, and I'm at this place where I've identified a few, but if I'm being honest, I'm not happy with it yet. There's still some specifics I want to tune into, because then we're going to take that and then study when those factors happen, what's happening with the release of acetylcholine and epinephrine. Okay? So I'm working on it. And if you're listening and be like, yo, that's super interesting, I'd love to talk more about that, I have some ideas, hit me up. I am always looking for people to bounce ideas off of, help with research. A lot of my research is a one-man show. I've got a great PhD that I work with. Shout out to Bryn Adamson, who is at the University of Colorado. And we do some work together, but she's a very busy professor doing her own research. So again, if you are listening, reach out. I feel like this is like Indeed.com. I'm putting a job out there. All right, let's get back on track. Now that you're thinking about your expectations of neuroplasticity and asking yourself, am I in a state of go or flow? How do we deal with this idea of repetitions? You've heard it. Oh, for neuroplasticity, you have to do repetitions. Okay? Now I'll get to the how many and measure that in question 3. But what counts as a repetition? Okay, let's keep this simple for a sec. Say you've got really bad low back pain, and kind of every time you move your arms or legs, your back isn't able to stabilize because of the back pain, or maybe because you have some organ issues, or I'm not going to go into the reason why right now. Everybody's different. But it's inhibiting your spinal stability. So you can't really isolate your limbs from your spine. And you didn't know that until you went to someone and go, hey, when you're moving your arm, you're really shifting at L1. They're like, no, I'm not. It's like, no, I'm feeling it right now. Well, you didn't have awareness of that because you couldn't feel it. That's normal. All you're feeling down there is pain. I get that. So how are we So if I'm looking at you and saying, all right, listen, we can't, I'm not going to say don't move your limbs. Well, how are you going to get around? I need to say, okay, how can we create a new movement pattern? At the Neuro Studio, we say this a million times, we add, we don't subtract, okay? So how can I differentiate that arm movement from the spine? And how can I measure those repetitions? Because if they're doing an arm exercise, say they're just reaching, because reaching's pretty important in life, in the gym and in life. So what happens every time they reach in the gym, in my studio? Their back moves with them. It's not stabilizing in the way it needs to for that exercise. Shit, that rep doesn't count, right? Because that would be reinforcing the pattern that's making the back pain worse. Well, how do we measure a good repetition? What am I going to say to my client? You're only allowed to reach when my hand is on your L1 vertebra. And I need you to do that 400 times a day. Well, how much would that cost, Megan, for you to just stay with me all day and put your hand on my back? Well, my hourly fee is $195. You do the math. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. So this is actually my true obsession. This is where my work really lives. This idea of repetitions. And my question to you is, how are you measuring your repetitions? Think about it. How are you measuring your repetitions? Are you just doing, okay, I've got to strengthen my lats. I'm going to do 15 lat pull downs. I'm going to do 3 sets of 15. There we go. There's my reps. That's fine. But how do we know that is that neuroplasticity? Is that go state or is that flow state? You're just going to be reinforcing the pattern you currently have. If that pattern's causing you pain, inhibiting your gait cycle or doing whatever, well, we need to change something. How are you measuring your repetitions? And I don't like to say good versus bad. How about we say this versus that? I'm waiting. Answer. I'm listening. Now, how I measure repetitions is, I'm just going to go there. I use the idea of accuracy and precision. I talked about this in other episodes, and this is something I go into great detail in the Advanced Neurotechniques course I teach for the Neuro Studio. Apologies, Willie is barking because he's a beagle, so who knows. But anyway, how I use this concept is I'm looking to always improve my client's accuracy of a new movement pattern, okay? So I am looking at sensory input. So when you're doing your lat pull down, we are going to analyze how you're currently doing it and how we can give a sensory approach to change the motor output. From there, how we measure repetitions is not by doing the lat pull down exactly the same. Is saying, what was the sensory input that created the change? Let me give you an example. I might give a distal cue to the feet. Why would I give a distal cue to the feet? Well, I need the hip to stabilize because the lat connects the lower quadrant to the upper quadrant, starts at the top of your pelvis, meets your thoracolumbar fascia, your lower back, it grabs your shoulder blade and attaches on the arm. So if the hip joint isn't stabilizing, we're not going to really get those lower fibers of the lat to really do what we need to do. This is why a lot of people have trouble with pull-ups, okay? Now, if your legs are hanging in a pull-up, that's kind of open chain. So their hips might not be stabilizing. They might be hanging out of the joint, drawing all that tensegrity down. And this way, the lat can't fully do its job. This is why you ever see people with pull-up bands. Yes, it's offsetting your weight, but it's not giving you a closed chain environment. That would be foot on the floor, but it's giving sensory input into the foot to help the hip stabilize better. Okay, most people aren't using it that way, but I should do an Instagram post on that. I think it might be helpful. Maybe not. Anyway, so say we find a distal sensory cue. I might have them maintain the pressure at their foot, or I might have them do a foot mobilization first and just keep their foot in a footprint. Okay? Deal with a specific sensory input, and then they'll do their lat pull down. If that changed the game, their back doesn't hurt, whatever their goal was. Okay? So this client's getting shoulder pain during their lat pull down. When I give them a distal foot cue, their hip stabilizes. Their movement pattern changes. It no longer hurts their shoulder. So I'll say, okay, pause. I want you to do as many reps as you can, to quote a friend, 3 sets of a million, with that sensory input. What? That sensory input. Maintaining whatever it was, maintaining the pressure at your foot. Maybe it was an isometric at the leg, whatever it was. And I'll say, don't take breaks for your lat. Take sensory breaks. Your brain is going to get dull to the sensation at your foot. So move it around every 5 reps, then reassess it. Then go back. So we're using a specific sensory focus that changed the motor output. And you're going to do as many reps as you can while focusing on that sensory input. Now, when I'm there, I'm looking for mistakes. Anytime I see a motor mistake, and when I say a motor mistake, a different movement pattern or something that might go back to our old pattern, I'll say, hey, do a heel raise and then tune back into your foot. I'm giving them the sensory break. I'm not saying you messed up, do it again. And what I'm testing here, my hypothesis is their cerebellum. By bringing them back to the sensory input, I want their brain to trigger a response. It got a break in the sensory input, and now it's back. Now we're back to reinforcing that pattern. So yeah, how do I measure repetitions? Using a specific sensory input that triggered the change, giving sensory breaks, and telling my client to do that as many times as they can throughout their lifetime in different exercises. Hey, can you reach up and grab something off your shelf and bring your elbow down, which is kind of a lat pull down, without changing the pressure at your foot? Bring the same concept in, the same sensory input throughout their day. Can you brush your teeth without changing the sensory input on your foot and reach your arm up and bring it back down? So yeah, I'm changing the movement a little bit, but I want to reinforce the pattern. Now, if I lost you on all the technical shit, let it go. What I want you to think about is, how are you going to measure your repetitions? Now, question 3 is, how many repetitions? I said 3 sets of a million. I was kidding, but not really. I don't know how many repetitions. Research does show that 400 to 600 reps a day, 400 to 600 reps a day with a new movement pattern, yeesh, that's a lot. Now, my hypothesis is that is because not all those reps count, and I'm putting air quotes up, because some of those repetitions might be a different movement pattern or reinforcing an old pattern. My hypothesis is you have to do less reps when there is clear sensory focus. Focus is one of the key components of neuroplasticity. Focus, alertness, repetition. Think about it. So if it ain't a go day, stay in a flow day. Just move, do things that make you feel good, and rep them out. Get your body moving. Get blood flow. Get nerve conduction. I mean, it might not be the most groundbreaking workout. Who gives a shit? People who work out every day hardcore are all injured. Do you want to be injured? To me, the best way to get weak and be in pain is to get injured. So maybe use these concepts of neuroplasticity and take it out of the movement arena. Maybe you want to learn a new skill. Well, think about, am I okay with failing? Am I going to see the value of the results? Am I going to push myself? Am I going to stay focused? And what is the sensory environment and thing that focuses me enough to get in my repetitions? I want to do as many repetitions as I can, but how are we measuring repetitions? So to close up shop today, when you're thinking about neuroplasticity, I'd like you to focus on question 1. What are your expectations? What are your goals? What are you looking to learn and achieve? How will you get the needed repetitions to make that new movement pattern, that new language, that new skill more efficient than what it's replacing? And last but not least, have some fun, because life is hard enough. Learning should be fun. And if you feel like you are not learning, that doesn't mean you're stupid or a bad student. It means your teacher is not good. I will die on that hill. I put the blame on teachers all the time. I am a teacher. Being a teacher is the hardest job. second to being a parent. But being a parent is like a teacher, except you have to go home with them. Ugh, I'm just kidding. So think about, as teachers, how can we adapt environment and help every person we work with feel that they have the ability to learn and grow? So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I did my best to be concise, give you some technical stuff with trying not to let your head explode, because again, I want you guys to critically think and see how this fits into your life. Hit me up if you have new ideas. I'm excited about research. And again, thank you all so much for supporting 3 Questions, and I'll see you next time.